Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a very special episode of Double Barrel Gaming. I am your host, MrBooMStickXL, and as you can hear in my voice, there's a tremendous amount of sadness. Unfortunately, in the past 24 hours, this country has seen gun violence on a level that has only been depicted in fake movies, books, and of course, video games. Now, video game violence versus real world violence is a debate that has been raging on since the release of Grand Theft Auto 3 on the PlayStation 1. And being ex-law enforcement, someone that has seen horror up close and personal, some things that still give me nightmares, I wanted to have this special edition of, again, gun violence versus real world violence. And in order to do that, I needed to have someone who I highly admire, not only as a streamer, as a content creator, but as a human being. And of course, with me today is the Italian Clowns, who you know from Four Guys with Quarters. Clowns, thank you so much for taking the time to be here on this very serious episode.
Thanks, Boom, for inviting me on the show. It's always a blast talking with you, and I think this is an extremely important topic.
Yeah, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm hoping that we get a big turnout because obviously the minute one of these shootings happen, the media and our government tend to start to point fingers. But before we get into all of the stats I was able to uncover in the last day and a half worth of research, I wanted to take a few seconds for a moment of silence for the 29 people that passed away and the 53 injured during the two mass shootings in El Paso, Texas and Dayton, Ohio. So let's do that real quick before we get any further. Just bow your head and pray for their families. Thank you so much for understanding the moment of silence. Clowns, when I was talking to you yesterday about this particular show, I had sent you all of the show notes like I always do. And, the number of mass shootings is growing at an alarming rate. And here are just some stats that I pulled that only go back 3 years, folks. And this credit goes to gunviolencearchive.com. If you want to know what the gun violence has been in the last maybe even 5 or 10 years, I highly recommend checking them out. I only pulled 3 years because obviously there's a lot to uncover today. And I'm going to go back to 2017, where there were 317 mass shootings in the United States. And then 2018 upped the ante, unfortunately, and now the mass shootings raised to 340. And as of 2019, unfortunately, it appears that the numbers are already outpacing the highest number of 340 at 251. Now, you can add an additional one there, making it 252, because last night in Brooklyn, here in New York, in the wee hours of the morning, 4 individuals were shot. Now, if you wonder, if you're interested to know what the United States considers mass shootings, it is 4 or more people that are injured by guns that are not the shooter. So obviously that last night we had what would be considered a mass shooting here in New York and Brooklyn because 4 people were shot. According to the article that I pulled from CBS New York, as of Sunday, which was the 216th day of the year, there have been 251 mass shootings in the United States, according to the data, which of course I mentioned them already. It's a non-profit group, Gun Violence Archive, which tracks every mass shooting in the country. these are scary numbers, clowns, and they're on the rise every year without sounding like an alarmist, dude. It needs to stop. And though before we break down how this has to happen, I want to discuss the current scapegoat, which the both mainstream news media and our elected officials have officially started headhunting, and of course that is the video game industry. Now, clowns, before I continue on with what I pulled, are you taken aback by the number of shootings in the last 3 years for mass shootings, and are you concerned that we could see record numbers in 2019?
Yeah, absolutely. It breaks my heart to see this kind of stuff happen. It breaks my heart that, communities get affected, that kids are caught in the crossfire. It's just heartbreaking to see this kind of stuff happen in general, no matter where you are. It just makes me really think about them. And maybe we'll talk about later in the show. It might accidentally pop up, but I wanted to bring it up real quick. Is that, it just seems like that something tragic happens, there has to be a scapegoat of why it occurred. In the 80s, it was heavy metal, and then the idea that heavy metal brought Satanism.
Yes.
And they try to do all those, the censor this, censor that back then. Then in the 90s, it was gangster rap. And all of a sudden, gangs were on the rise, and gangs were killing each other and random people. And it was gangster rap that caused it all. And from the 90s to 2019, here we are. Video games. I mean, it just, I don't know what to say. Because there shouldn't be a scapegoat. There should be solutions, not a scapegoat.
No, I absolutely agree with you. I think that this world is a reactive one, and it's much easier to point the finger to make things seem like the easy answer. In order to really break down why these mass shootings are going to happen. But before deciding to actually have this show today, clowns, I wanted to do some research of my own, bringing some findings that I will quote and link where I found the findings, and also add the links in the show notes below, so people themselves, if they want to, not just go based on what I'm saying, if they want to read the entire article, it's just a click away. And why? The question really we have to ask here is, why do people blame video games for mass shootings? And in an article that I pulled from Quora.com, they show how each generation has something that something was blamed for the cause of violence, and of course the scapegoat. And you brought that up. This is a breakdown going all the way back to the 40s. In 1940, violence within the United States was blamed on comic books, right? In the 1950s, violence within the United States was blamed on television rock and roll, okay? In the 1970s, violence within the United States was blamed on heavy metal and Dungeons and Dragons, okay? In the 1990s, which is what Clowns already had mentioned, it was rap and video games was blamed, okay? And in the 2000s, this country, instead of finding, really getting a solution to why there was so much violence within this, gun violence within the country, they blamed the internet and mobile phones as the cause. And of course, video games are merely just the latest threat to panic the older generation. I mean, I don't think I can make it any more clearer. They say, certainly the older communities tend to be a little bit more confirmative and prone to panic over, actually having facts, clowns. I want to bring up the second article, clowns. This one I pulled from ScienceDaily.com. And here's what they had to say. Researchers at the University of York found no evidence to support the theory that video games make players more violent. In a series of experiments with more than 3,000 participants, the team demonstrated that video game concepts do not prime players to behave in a certain way that increase the realism of violent video games, and this does not equate to increased aggression within said players. The dominant model of learning in games is built on the idea that exposing players to concepts such as violence in a game makes those concepts easier to use in real life. This is known as priming and is thought to lead to changes in behavior. Previous experiments on this effect, however, has so far proved mixed conclusions. And they also continue, clowns, before I get your opinion on this. Researchers at the University of York expanded the number of participants in experiments compared to the studies that had gone on before it, and compared different types of gaming realism to explore whether more conclusive evidence could be found. They did not find anything. So, clowns, I read you 2 articles. Now, listen. Right now, if you go to Google, you could Google gun violence versus real-world violence and get 10,000 articles. And it is a proven fact, going from the sources I've already provided, and I have one more big one, to Harvard, to the New York Times, to any paper, to any university. Video game violence does not make someone want to go out and go on a murdering spree. What are your takes from the 2 articles that I read, clowns?
There's something that caught my attention in those articles, and I'm really shocked to hear this, but correct me if I'm wrong, but you said in the 1940s they attributed violence to comic books?
That's correct, yes.
Wow, so for all this time since the 1940s, our politicians that deal with mental health, they're all looking for scapegoats instead of the actual object that caused the type of destruction.
Right. That's correct. Easier to point the finger than actually, fix a problem. Yes, that's what it seems like to me.
Oh, my mind is blown right now, Boom.
Yeah, I mean it's a bit shocking, but it's also not surprising.
Absolutely.
Well, listen, real quick before I get on to the third topic, and this one was pulled from, it was written this year, pulled from Forbes.com. I have to thank Nightwolf3186 for the outstanding $2 super chat. He says, prayers sent. Thanks again, Boom, for doing this. It's my pleasure, Nightwolf. I appreciate that very much. I thought it was important. I thought it was important to address, not only on a social level, but on a professional level, being ex-law enforcement. Again, in the third article that I pulled this from Forbes.com, new studies show that there is no link between violent video games and aggression in teenagers, clowns. In yet another study on the subject, it shows that there is no link between playing violent video games and the aggression that comes with it. Courtesy of the Oxford Internet Institute and the University of Oxford, this new study was published in Royal Society Open Science and is being touted as being one of the most comprehensive studies on the subject to date. That is because the study used a combination of subjective and objective data to measure teen aggression and violence in games, compared to previous research on the subject which relied on self-reported data from teenagers. This study used information from parents and caregivers to judge the level of aggressive behavior in their own children. Okay, so this is the parents that are actually helping with this study, clowns. What's more, the content of the video games was classified using the official PEGI and ESRB rating systems, rather than just the player's perceptions on the amount of violence in the game. If you're curious about the sampling here, as you should be, of course, it was comprised of British 14 to 15-year-olds and an equal number of parents or caretakers, totaling 2,008 subjects in all. The result of this throughout the entire approach showed that there was no link between violent video games and teenage aggression, something that lead researcher Professor Andrew, I'm going to butcher his name, Przybisky, went on to clarify. Now, clowns, here's the thing. This is a paper that I found after doing about 3 hours worth of research, because I found a lot of them. But because they're touting this as the most comprehensive study, is why I wanted to make this the last story. And this is coming from, a place like Oxford, who would be considered a top-notch institute, right? I mean, am I? I don't think I'm going out on a limb by saying that. And again, it's being touted as an important study, and their findings seem to agree with hundreds and hundreds of other studies that video game violence does not equate to real world violence. What are your takeaways from this study?
I'm looking at the show notes, and I listened to what you reiterated on that study, and pool of people in the study, 2008 subjects in all. And the fact that there's been no link between violent video games and teenage aggression. That should say a lot, because if you expand that study to 4,012 people, you're probably going to get the same results at that point.
Yeah.
I think it's a fair pool and a fair amount of research done. And the fact that it was done, and correct me if I'm wrong, but England's a lot stricter with gun laws.
Yes. Yeah. These mass shootings are only happening here in the United States.
So I mean that says something there. I wonder if that was done in the U.S. If it'd be the same. But looking back at the previous two research studies that you quoted, because even going back to, let me just see. I think this one was done in the U.S. where found that there was no link between violence and video games, and they were less likely to bully as well.
Yes,
I think
that's
that
correct.
One was,
yes.
I mean, I don't know where politicians are getting on their high horses and the media is just going along with it and disregarding all this scientific research done by these experts, mental health experts, doctors, scientists, and they're just like, hey, we're politicians and lobbied by, gun manufacturers. We're just going to let you know that we think it's video games today.
Well, I mean,
in the 40s it was comics, and
yes.
In the 80s it was heavy metal, and in the 90s there was some gangster up there, but we were wrong. Today it's definitely video games. As politicians, we assure you. Man, it gets me so angry, Boom.
Yeah, it certainly gets me angry because it's first of all, I'm not just I didn't want to do today's show just because I'm a person that enjoys video games, and I'm going to be honest with you. These politicians can threaten all they want. They're not going to shut down video games. They're not going to shut down movies. They're not going to shut down novels or graphic novels or plays with violence. It's just a terror tactic by our government to scare people into painting themselves into a corner by with nonsense. In order to talk about this constructively, I provided links. I will provide links in the show notes. I've provided written documentation that I researched over the last 12 hours or so, and I had to put it as the show notes. This is how you fix a problem. Now, I want to touch on. I know mental illness is a big deal.
So Boom?
Yes. Hey, what's going on, dude? How's everything? Welcome.
I snuck in here real quick. Hey, I only got a couple minutes, man. I just, by the way, great topic. I was listening, while I'm working here, and but I did want to chime in.
Please, by all means, the more the merrier. Thanks for coming.
Because absolutely, man. Again, I only have a couple minutes, but I'm glad you're talking about this, because I still think that this is something that still needs to be talked about. I hate to see that we're getting to a point in this country where this is becoming like the new norm, and we're becoming desensitized. Like I'm guilty of it myself. I heard 2 mass shootings, and I gotta be honest with you, I didn't even bother looking at what was going on. Where maybe 7 years ago, when Sandy Hook happened, or Columbine, or any other mass shootings that went on, I was immediately glued to the television. Right? Yesterday, it was kind of like, oh, okay, it's another mass shooting, and that sounds terrible. And I reflected upon that this morning, and I'm like, it's because I'm becoming desensitized.
Yeah, that's correct. That's a great point, dude.
Because it's becoming the norm, and it's like, I think I heard Clown say, like, these politicians are out here kind of standing on their soapbox, and it's like, guys, get off your asses and do something. There's a problem here. There's a serious problem in this country. I have children. I have 4 kids. I kid you not, man. I'm terrified now. For the first time in my life, I've never been terrified about walking out of my house and being a victim of crime ever in my life. It's the first time in my life. I'm scared. I look at those pictures. Walmart. I have a Walmart down the street from me, right? I mean, that could have been me.
Yes.
It could be me and my kids.
It is scary, dude. It is definitely scary.
And something's got to change. And blaming video games. I heard you guys talk about comic books were blamed, movies were blamed, rap music, video games again in the 90s.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's like it's a scapegoat. They are trying, guys. They're trying to pull the wool over your eyes. I want everyone to listen seriously. If you're a gamer, wake up. Look, no matter whatever political allegiance you have to, whether you're a Democrat, you're Republican, whether you're a Trump supporter or you're not a Trump supporter, if you're a gamer, you need to say something and say, no, we're not. You're not going to scapegoat us. You're not going to point the finger at, because clearly this is a problem that's bigger than gaming. This in this country, this is a country that was founded on a culture of violence. If you look at the history of this country, you'll see violence throughout the history of this country, and it pervades today, and it's impacting our youth. It's impacting kids at school. It's a problem, and I think I hear about mental illness, and that's a big talking point right now, and I understand that there's maybe some validity there, but you know what, Boom, we got to be careful. We can't demigod people with mental health issues.
No, absolutely not. No. We're going to get into it for sure.
Yeah, and again, my last point here, and I'll let you have the floor, man, because I know I'm kind of ranting.
No, don't be silly. It's okay.
But Boom, I heard the president speak today, and again, I'm not trying to get political. Talked about mental illness, and my concern with the mental illness. I understand that's kind of been a talking point more recently, is that we don't want to demigod mental illness, because I'll tell you what, there's other countries that have citizens that suffer from mental illness. We're not the only country that has citizens that have mental illness.
Right, but they're not shooting up the place either.
Yes, we don't have mass shootings in those countries. And I'm telling you, if you remove the mental illness, you remove the video games, other countries play video games. They don't have mass shootings. You'll see mass shootings in Japan. You'll see mass shootings in China. You'll see mass shootings in the UK.
Do you know why? Can I just add to your...
go ahead, man.
The reason why is because every one of those countries you've mentioned have outrageously strict gun laws. Now, before you continue, I know you only have a few minutes. Yeah. I pulled something up last night that blew my mind, and I found it on USAtoday.com, where they listed the 10 most easiest states to purchase a firearm. And get this: if you and I, who do not have a gun permit, walked into a store in Alabama, we do not need a license, registration, or permit required in other places to buy a gun. Nope, you don't need it. Here's the other state: Alaska. No license, registration, or permit required to buy a gun. Let's see, who else? Colorado, Arkansas. Same thing. No license, registration, or permit required to buy a gun. Colorado's the same exact thing. Delaware, Florida, Georgia, Idaho, Indiana, and Kansas. The top 10 locations, middle of America, by the way, of where you and I, Johnny, don't know anybody, could walk into a gun store and have the money to buy said gun, and they will sell you said gun or guns. And that is a huge problem in this country. And again, if you want to continue just what you were saying, I just wanted to add the reason why there's mass shootings in this country and not in the other countries is because of this. You can buy a gun in these 10 states, and I could probably look for the top 20 and give you another 20, but I thought the 10 would be enough, of where you can just walk in with nothing except for the money and buy a gun.
Yeah, you know what? It's you mentioned it's if the common denominator of this is guns.
Yes.
And if you look at, we're benchmarking ourselves versus other countries that have mental illness, that have people that play video games, that play Call of Duty, they don't have mass shootings. We do. And the common denominator of those mass shootings is guns, and it's like something needs to change. It's like how many? It's heartbreaking, man. After Sandy Hook,
yes,
children get murdered, kids,
right before Christmas. Yeah, that's horrible.
Yeah, nothing was done. So like, what? And honestly, as like we tout to be the best country in the world, we have this pride to be Americans. We're the land of the free, home of the brave. To me, this is an embarrassment. This is an embarrassment to this country that we have this issue going on.
Yeah, it's supposed to be we're supposed to be like not a third world country, right? We're supposed to be in the upper echelon of with laws. Yes, as civilization. Yes, that's correct.
I mean, I just don't get it. And guys, I know I'm on my soapbox here, but honestly, like, in watching the news this morning, I was drinking coffee and seeing my kids go to camp and
it's nerve-wracking. It has to be.
Dude, I'm telling you, man, I was shaking this morning.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, Boom, I've never in my life have been scared. Never in my life. And I'm telling you guys, honestly, man, and I'm being very sincere, I'm scared. I don't want to walk outside my door and take my kids to Walmart and ever think, damn, somebody's going to come here storming in and start shooting.
I got news for you. This is okay. Now I'm gonna tell a bit of a personal story here. Okay. Now I'm obviously ex-law enforcement, so I do have guns, plural. Okay. Yeah,
you do, Boom. I've seen you work out, man.
Well, they're not that big anymore. I haven't been to the gym in a couple of months. I just been on a lazy train. My health hasn't been that great, but I've been getting sick a lot. I don't know what it is, but in regards to actual firearms, I have a few. And of course, I have to train with those said firearms. I go twice a year, like I did when I was an active police officer. And I fire and clean them. They're in safe. They're in the safe. They have locks on them. They are protected the way a gun owner is supposed to treat a deadly weapon. And the issue here is, you said something about when you go into Walmart now. When you're new as a police officer, you carry your firearm everywhere because you want. It's like me. I wanted to save the world. It's the truth. Like my wife, Josh is with me and calls me Captain America because I want to help everyone. Like I really have that mentality. I want to help and save as many people as I can. I was reckless like that as a cop, where I would put myself in danger, no problem. As long as I can help, as long as I can protect somebody else, that's the way it was. Listen, nobody wants to get killed in uniform, but if it happened, it happened. That's what I swore in to do, and I'm going to make sure that I went out and helped as many people as I could. And when you're new, you carry your firearm all over the place because it's again, you want to save the world. As you start to get older and you start to become a little, your whiskers start to turn from black to gray. Right, you become a veteran, and you're like, it's a pain in the ass, pardon my French, to carry it all over the place. Because you know what, the gun is 12 pounds when it's fully loaded. People don't understand that. It's like a weight you're carrying around with you.
Jesus,
and ever since these mass shootings started happening, I started carrying again, especially when I'm out with my wife and her sister or my nephew or my ex-partner's kid. When I go to pick him up from school. That I bring it with me all over the place because, unfortunately, I'm not going to be put in a position where I can't help someone if someone else has a firearm. You know what I'm saying? And that's the world, unfortunately, we're living in. From someone who just kept it in the safe and never touched it, where it got dust on it, to now I carry it all the time because I'm afraid that I'm going to be that I'm possibly could be put in a position where someone may need my help, and that could be my family, and I can't do anything because I'm just an unarmed dude. You know what I'm saying? And that's the world that we're living in, and it's scary. It's unfortunate. I worry about my nephews, in plural. I worry about my wife going to work. She works in the senior center. Anyone could walk in. You know what I'm saying? So it is a terrifying world we live in, and the unbelievable access that regular folk have to some of these guns, especially these high caliber assault rifles, it's not to be believed.
Well, let me ask you a question. Why do we need AR-15s?
Well, I don't know.
Why do we need these high-powered assault rifles? Somebody tweeted this out. I don't know how accurate this statistic is. Sometimes when I see things on Twitter, especially when they're throwing out numbers, I kind of take it with a grain of salt. But someone said there was an assault rifle ban from I think the mid '90s up to about when W got into office, and they let the I think in 2004 I think it was they let the ban on assault rifles expire, right?
Yes.
And someone said since then there's been like a 237% increase in mass shootings since that law expired banning assault rifles. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how true that number is. If it is true, that's alarming. That's alarming.
I think there's something that comes into play here that kind of, wow, it's kind of hard to say, but I understand it. And I think it's part of that right to bear arms issue. And I think in that assault rifles they weren't around back then, the capacity they are today, and they're completely different today. But I think the idea is that in that belief, if the American people were ever have and as government, then the American people could defend themselves. I think that's why they still allow assault rifles today.
But I mean, and I understand that rationale, clowns. But don't you think like that's kind of antiquated now? Like, I mean, like when that amendment was made, it was made during a time when there was a tyrant, there was a king, and the British were basically coming in and grabbing the firearms of settlers, and even ransacking their homes, and there's no way for settlers to really protect themselves from what were what they considered foreign invaders, the British.
Right.
But isn't that law? I mean, like, isn't that law kind of antiquated? Like now, like and the founding fathers had no idea. They couldn't predict what was going to have 300 something years later. With the U.S. and mass shootings, like there's no way they could have predicted that, right?
No, that's absolutely not.
Yeah, no way, because I don't even think they would have thought about the types of population that we have today.
Yeah,
and the trade routes that we have today,
or the type of weapons we have now. I mean, I don't know, guys.
I'm going to say this.
It's scary, man. It's scary.
It is scary, and that's I want to make this perfectly clear. Okay, I'm going to talk about mental illness, but from a person's perspective, not someone with a PhD, which I do not have. Okay, someone had, when I put out this tweet, and someone was like, well, you can't really talk about mental illness because you don't really have a 20-year history with it, and that in fact is correct. I would never dare put myself on a pedestal that I had no business being. Okay, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I'm well aware of that, but I'm gonna say this. I have, as everyone knows, I worked as a New York City police officer, an active police officer in the field for almost for over 21 years. And in the course of doing my job during this 21-year career romp, if you will, I've come across many what the acronym for us would be called EDPs, which is again the acronym for emotionally disturbed persons. And obviously I can't tell, I can't look at someone. It would be considered profiling when you say, "Well, that guy looks crazy. Let's bring him inside." Right?
His hair's all disheveled.
Right? You can't do that, and I of course never would or could for that matter. But there is an aspect to mental illness within the gun buying industry, And unfortunately, even though it may not be 100%, 80%, and 65% of people that with mental illness buy guns and do mass shootings. I don't have any statistics in front of me to be able to tell you that, but I can tell you that a good portion of the mass shootings that have in fact been documented where death and injury have occurred, some of those people have had mental illnesses, okay? And the problem lies when you, again, going back to the 10 states that you can buy a firearm with nothing but the money, there has to be a legitimate way of checking someone's background that goes past the money they're handing you. There has to be I heard Trump say that. We need to do better background checks. You know what? Every time there's an effing mass shooting, that's all they ever say. We need to do better background checks. Well, when the F are we going to start doing background checks that not only check if they're ex-criminals buying these guns, but also have mental illness that would have to be, I mean, there should be red flags. If you've been committed for having mental illness, or there has to be something, and I understand that it becomes like a privacy rights thing. You know, like when you talk to a doctor, he can't tell you about a patient, but there has to be something in place that tells the gun seller, who, by the way, kind of just want to turn this a little bit. We never talk about the people selling guns and holding them accountable. Okay, that's one thing. I'm not saying that they should be, put onto the rack if they sell a gun to a person that does a mass shooting. What I'm saying is that if they didn't do the proper checks and they just looked at this as a sale, then their license should be taken away and they should never be allowed to sell a gun again. Would you guys agree with that?
Yeah, 100%, man. And to your point, yeah. I'm sorry, Clowns. Go ahead, man.
I'm just agreeing with Boom on this. I think that there should be something that goes after some of these gun sellers. As far as the, like if you've been institutionalized for mental health reasons, I think that's a tougher thing to follow up on because of HIPAA laws,
yes.
But also because sometimes people are institutionalized for the wrong reasons. Like, let me give you some examples, and this is what makes it very difficult. So somebody could be having a seizure in public, and they might be acting erratically, right?
Right.
So somebody calls the police, and the police don't know what to do, so maybe they take them to the hospital, and the hospital doesn't know their history because they have nothing on them, so they just institutionalize them, and then 72 hours later they find out, oh, he was just having a seizure. So I think it's hard in that aspect.
I mean, I agree. Go ahead.
Yeah. I agree, but I think, unfortunately, I mean, in some instances, maybe that's a tough choice we have to make as citizens, where we might have to give up some of those rights to, protect the greater good.
I mean, what would be the problem with you having to wait 2 weeks to pick up said firearm until the proper channels, until the proper background checks were done?
Well, what about this? What about universal background checks? Like, that's something that's been put on the table forever, and the NRA's against it, but it's a common sense thing. It's like,
I think it is common sense. I agree.
If I'm not allowed to buy a firearm in Maryland, and there's no universal background check, no one's going to pick that up.
Yeah, that's correct.
There needs to be more checks and balances. And look, guys, here's the other thing too. And I'm not trying to get on my soapbox here, but look, my parents are immigrants. They came from, Colombia, South America, Ecuador, and so I have a little bit different perspective. I think this country's great. I really do. But at the same time, I think that the idea of this country, for the people, by the people, and we elect these officials, right? I heard a senator or a congressman from Ohio say that 80% of people of U.S. citizens support new stiffer gun control laws, right? And he's saying the American people are for it. Congress needs to act up. Needs to get off. He said it needs to get off their asses and do something, right? If 80% of if this is true, and again, I know if the statistic is actually true, because politicians throw things out, numbers. But if it is true, for argument's sake, if it's true, if 80% of this country supports stricter gun control laws, and Congress is not acting, even though the majority of Americans want this to happen, then what does that tell you about our government? They're not working for us.
No, what they're working is for best interest groups.
Yes.
That's obvious. Yes, for sure.
Yeah, and boom, that's got to change, man. Like we can't. It's got to change. If this number is true, it's appalling to me that senators, congressmen are going to sit there and say, "Oh, we're going to ignore the 80%." Well, then this government isn't for the people.
Right.
It's for people with big pockets, big wallets. Corporations. That's not how.
Well, that's why everybody that's an elected official at Washington, they're all millionaires.
Yeah, it's true, man. I live outside D.C. You got to see some of the houses these congressmen live in.
Oh no, I believe it. I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's like, it's got to change, man. Stuff's got to change. It really does. It's not. Feel like we're at a point now where, I mean, how much more? I mean, what is it going to take, Boom? I mean, really, like I don't get it.
It's scary because
I mean,
if you look back to some of these mass shootings, the one that happened, where was it? Las Vegas, where the guy shot into that concert, right? That was a big event. A lot of people died there. A lot of people were seriously injured. The guy, rented a hotel room. The guy was a million. By the way, the guy was a millionaire, right? So he had money. He had all these guns. He blocked off the door. He was in there shooting for what seemed like half an hour. He just let loose on everybody.
Use the bump stock to simulate,
Yeah.
And so, then
you ask what it's going to take. Well, Jesus Christ, I don't know, because that was a pretty big incident. The one that you mentioned right before Christmas with all those poor children, that makes me want to vomit when I think about it. Like literally throw up in right over my computer, making me so sick because that is a pretty tragic incident. And is that not enough? That's my question.
I don't think. I'm telling you, when Columbine should have been the last stop.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, and remember those guys dressed up and mimicked the scene from The Matrix.
Yeah.
I mean, we still have violent movies today.
Yeah, it's funny. Real quick before I get into what I want to hear from Clowns on this. JD Gamer with the outrageous and very generous $10 super chat. He says, "Can we please call these people shooting up innocent people, women, children, what they really are? Cowards and terrorists. I refuse to give them the cover of mental illness. Writing a manifesto means that you're sane." Yeah, so if you're going to write a manifesto, that's premeditated. That would be considered premeditated murder because you're planning on doing this mass whatever, and you're well aware that you're going to do it. It isn't like you just woke up and you were in a daze and you thought that they were aliens and you just started to want to save the world from the for the people, and you just kill people by accident. I mean, does stuff like that happen? I'm sure it does, but these mass shootings, the ones that have been in the public eye, have been from people that. If you look on some of their Facebook posts and their Twitter posts and their social media posts, they talked about some really violent and scary things. How come no one reported them after seeing this is beyond me. But look, I'm glad that we're talking about everything. Like I said, I did not know how this show was going to go. I didn't realize I was going to have 100 people watching. Enrique, I want to of course, thank you for being here. And of course, Clowns, I couldn't do this without you guys. But I'm
sorry, but I do have to go, man.
Okay, listen, we'll talk soon. Thank you so much for popping in, dude. Really appreciate it.
Man. Yeah, great show, great topic, man. Glad I could hop in for a little bit. So I'll see you guys later.
Yes, definitely appreciate that. Thank you. And Clowns, I really kind of want to reel this back in, even though this is one of the most serious topics I have ever covered. Within the near 2 years of doing this channel, and we've talked about mass shootings before on several shows. I'm sure. I've just never gone into the kind of details I was able to pull that I was up real late writing last night. But I want to reel this a little back in a little bit to talk about how we as gamers need to make our voices heard. Because I think that it's a total BS and a real slap to the face that these senators. I mean, you see them. They're on NBC, CBS, Fox. They're out there. Video games. Folks, listen. Video games didn't make these people go out and do these horrible things. Again, we talked about it in the opening of the show. There's no documentation that even comes close to suggesting that if you play violent video games like Doom and Call of Duty and Halo and Fortnite, and I think that's the thing that's even more hilarious. I think one of these, what was it? I think a senator from Colorado was calling out Fortnite in particular. Most of the people that I see playing Fortnite are kids, and most of them are running around in panda outfits with with all kinds of attachments, whether that be pink and blue and all kinds of colors of the rainbow. I don't necessarily think that is what you would consider, your stake in the ground for violent video games. And what about you? Do you agree with that, clowns?
Yeah, because Fortnite is very cartoony.
Yes.
And it's very unrealistic. It's not like you're just gonna go. What was it? Oh man, what's that city called? Twin something in the middle of the map where everybody used to go and just have a big fight and jump off buildings. Yeah, that's not gonna happen. It's not realistic. You're not gonna go up on these buildings and like have these rainbow gliders or rubber duck gliders and just have fun, jump off. No, it's not gonna happen.
Yeah, it's funny because I keep seeing the word evil thrown around in this chat. First of all, I have to thank my chat for being here. First of all, 101 people so far, and everyone that has been talking has been making good points. You're keeping it, you're respecting each other's opinion. I definitely appreciate that. I just want to talk about, people, as a society, right? Again, this is coming from a person, not someone that has a PhD. I want that to be completely understood. Now, do I consider myself more knowledgeable than the average person? Yes, I do, because I did a career that dealt with different situations that did give me a little bit more of a broader view of things. Unfortunately, clowns, as you know, the world, not the world as a whole, but people within this world are evil, and these evil people that create these mass shootings, these horrific incidents that go down in history as not just affecting the poor people that were either killed or injured, but just the country as a whole. It wounds the country every time we have one of these mass shootings, because you have to ask yourself, every time one of these things happen, and really, I want to kind of thank Enrique for popping in here, because he brought a little bit of he made this a little personal when he talks about his family and how how nervous he was this morning, and that he to the point where he was shaking as a parent. And every time we have one of these mass shootings, my wife and I don't have kids, but we have plenty of godchildren. I have my 2 nephews that I love, that I would give my life for in a second. And I, of course, worry about them. And, of course, I know you have children as well, and you have a family. And it is really scary to think that if you just wanted to go to Walmart to pick up, I don't know, some groceries, and this kind of thing happens, there are evil people in the world that are unsympathetic, that lack empathy. And giving these people an opportunity to purchase a firearm with nothing more than just the money that you can use to buy it really needs to change. Video games as a whole will always be a form of artistic, expression. Okay, sure, some games are more violent. The new Call of Duty that's coming out is ultra violent, but it also is rated M for mature. Okay, this is why we have the ESRB. They're there for a reason, to make sure that kids aren't getting these games. I just have to say that again. And I know I'm all over the place on this because I wasn't sure how this was going to go, clowns. But in your opinion, do you think that the video game community, and again, I want this to be understood. When I say video game community, I don't give a flying fuck, pardon my French, what flag you fly. Put that shit down. Okay? This is not the time to talk about who's got better fucking exclusives than the other brand. Okay? We're supposed to get together as a community. Okay? Stand up, arm in arm with each other, and tell the government that video games are not the answer, and they need to do better than just scapegoat it. Do you agree with that, clowns?
Yeah, I really think that everybody needs to take a step together on these issues. Especially, we the people need to let our politicians know that it's not the video games, that there's real reasons these things are occurring that they're overlooking. I'm so tired of these console wars. I'm so tired of the scapegoatism in this community. Gamers just need to get together. We're all people. We're all humans. We all like video games. Let's just keep it simple like that and stop flying these flags to diversify ourselves when we're all people. That's what we are.
That's a great point. I mean, listen, we're just about closing on an hour, and again, this isn't a stream that I was, this wasn't going to be a show that was going to be a 2-hour show, because quite frankly, I'm going to be honest with you. I know it's going to sound ridiculous, but I got a bit of a heavy heart, and it's we did 60 minutes. We put a lot of facts out there. I'm going to have a closing statement. Clowns, I'd like you to have a closing statement on this, and then we're gonna get back to just playing video games, and of course, clowns.
There's something I want to say.
Please, really, by all means, take it away.
So the Parkland shooting that happened at the Stoneman Majority Douglas School,
yes,
was not that far from us, and friends that had friends at that school. So they all heard about it. And not even like a year later after that, my daughter's school, there were want to be what you call like copycat threats.
Yeah.
Even though they were never carried out, they were just And then one day we get a phone call from the sheriff's office, and he says, it's a pre-recorded message he sent out to all the parents, and they were like, do not come to the school, do not pick up your children, shooter on the premises.
Holy
so
Christ.
No, what was going on, and some of us that got in the car line saw like SWAT team and sheriff's officers there. No clue what was happening. It turned out what happened was that there was a gang of kids, about 3 or 4 of them, that were stealing cars from the sheriff's department, and they decided to park the stolen vehicle at my daughter's high school, run in armed into the gymnasium.
Wow.
Everybody was just afraid, man. So this whole topic touches home. And the sheriff who responded on the scene, the deputies and the sheriff, never once blamed video games. You know what they blamed? They blamed poor parenting.
Oh, please. Yes. You know what? That's a great point. Something that I really forgot to touch on. You know what? Maybe we're going to go a few minutes longer, because I really want you to nail this one home. Everyone blames everyone but the parents. I want you to, please, because you're a parent, talk about this.
And the deputies on scene said that, it was the parents' responsibility to raise those kids properly. It was the parents' responsibility to make sure that their kids, weren't harboring illegal weapons, because the kids were holding stolen weapons in their backpacks. This gang of kids that went to my daughter's school, and one of the parents probably knew about it, turned a blind eye, didn't think anything serious.
Yep.
And the deputy also said that 2 of the kids' parents were involved in gang-related crimes themselves. Whether it was, they wouldn't specify, but it could have been anything from selling drugs to selling stolen property.
Fantastic.
To being enforcers, any of that stuff. And he said the kids get most of their ideas from their parents, like being at home, growing up, seeing what their parents do, sometimes trying to mimic those actions, trying to get the hearts of their parents. So if those kids had a dad or a mom who was tough on the outside and lived a gangster lifestyle, the kid might have tried to live up to their ideals and went out and did the same stuff. So in the situation at my daughter's school, it was poor parenting, socioeconomic situation that those kids grew from, and the only way they knew how to make money was by stealing cars, selling drugs, and running guns.
That's pretty unbelievable. And these are kids. I bet they were. How old were they?
16 and 17 years old.
Unbelievable.
Yep.
I'm going to say this. I'm glad you brought it up. And I really would have been mad at myself when I listened to the replay. I didn't bring this up, because I was a youth officer for many, many years, almost my entire career. So you say, well, Boom, what did you do as a youth officer? Well, for the most part, I was assigned to Christopher Columbus High School. If you know where that is, it just so happens to be in the Bronx, where I worked. And it just also so happens to be the school I graduated from in 89. So I graduated as a punk kid in 89 and went back in 97. I have 3 years as a police officer. I got a detail, weekends off. I got into the school. And back then, the school was like lawless. The gang violence in that school was just not to be believed. You had Bloods, you had Crips, you have Latin Kings, you name it was in there. And, I went in there, which, again, the Captain America saved the world attitude, and I locked up a shit ton of people, and I cleaned up the school. And I met a lot of kids, got some kids out of gangs, and worked with a lot of kids that were failing to make them pass. It was one of the greatest experiences of my career has been being a youth officer, which spanned double-digit years. I think it was like 12 years before I went back to the streets and wanted to do something else. But unfortunately, the parenting that goes on, or the lack of parenting that goes on, more times than not, is really a major factor that no one talks about. I mean, again, listen, again, this you in the next week or so, you're gonna hear the blame being pushed on mental illness, video games, the Matrix, you name it. Everyone is gonna get the blame except for what happens at home. Like, go ahead, brother.
But real quick, sorry to cut you off, but
No.
Did you read your boy Roy's super chat?
No, actually, let me do that right now. Your boy Roy, thank you so much for the outstanding $5 super chat. It's very generous of you. He says society is moving so fast and non-personal. Parents are spending less quality time with their kids. We need to slow our lives down. That's a great point, dude. First of all, thank you so much for the super chat. Thank you for taking the time to put that excellent quote in there. Yes, I agree with that. Parents need to understand that family time is important. I'm not a parent, but I'm going to tell you this. I make it my business to treat my nephews like they're my own kids, and that goes from not only just going out with them and treating them well, but to being strict with them. My partner in the NYPD, I worked with her for 7 years before I retired. And I'm very good friends with her husband, and I love her like a sister. But their son, I pick up on days that he has half a day because they don't have to leave work. I'm retired, so Uncle Craig go gets him. And there have been plenty of times where he's come here, and he's looked, and he's tested. Oh, Uncle Craig, can I just try Grand Theft Auto? I'll just drive around. And the answer is always no. He knows. So I treat him the same way his parents treat him. And I think that with parenting, you have to know what your kids are doing. First of all, see, my mom was very young when she had me. She was 15. A lot of people don't know that. I mean, this is like a revelation. And she's 17 when she had my brother. My parents were together until my pop passed away. We had the greatest pair of parents you've ever could possibly imagine. But man, when I tell you, if we got out of line, the chancleta would come off and it would be like a boomerang, and she would whack us right in the back of the head with it. And if you're Hispanic, you know exactly what I'm freaking talking about, okay? My mom did not play, and one of her biggest sayings growing up was, if I don't know your friends, you don't know your friends. That's how serious she was as a young mother. She did not play. Now, my father, my pop, he never hit us, because if he would have murdered us. But before I continue, real quick, JD Gamer with another outrageous and extremely generous $10 super chat. He says, as a parent, I empathize with you clowns, but by no means can I let us get side-railed into saying these underprivileged kids represent most of these mass shooters. The profile is not gang-related. No, and that's true. I don't think actually JD Gamer, I just want to make sure that I don't think that's what Clowns was actually trying to push. Clowns, would you want to clarify that?
I think, in this situation, it was more of a situational thing where these kids grew up and they lived. It was more common to live in, I can't really said it, and I'm probably paraphrasing, but the socioeconomic classes that they lived in spawned more gang violence in that neighborhood than anything else. So I think it's situational, because it does not represent anywhere else in the U.S. It's just that one little part of town where there's more gang related activity, and it just so happens to be, I guess, less financially stable as well, and most of the income comes from illegal activities, is what the officer was alluding to.
Yeah, Z Black Rider in the chat said Boom's mom was smart. I'll tell her that when I go to see her this week. Yeah, she says always, don't tell people I used to hit you like that. They think I was abusive. My mom wasn't abusive, but she set our ass straight. There's no doubt about it. But look, I'm going to say this. Like I said, this was a tough one, guys. This was a tough one to put together. I had a whole other show ready to go before this horrible shooting that I have now incorporated into the Xbox Factor podcast, which is going to be happening this Wednesday. Again, it's another Wednesday. It's normally Thursday, but because the Welsh Gamer is not officially coming back until the middle of the month, trying to get a co-host, I was able to get one that was available on Wednesday. But clowns, listen, I just want to close it out because, like I said, we could be here for 3 hours. I want to thank everyone. The 105 plus people that took your time. I hope that Clowns and I, and of course Enrique from Basement Radio Arcade podcast, handle this in a professional manner, where we're just not, lambasting, the mental illness or situational parenting or anything like that. We put the facts out there. I spent about 8 hours on Sunday doing the research for this. While I was hanging out with Mrs. Boomstick, I was on the phone, pulling articles, and I was actually, if you didn't listen to it, Brap did a podcast last night that I think we were on till almost 1 o'clock in the morning, and then after that, I wrote for another hour. So I was up till 2 writing to make sure that today's show was done in a proper manner. Clowns, I got to thank you so much for being here because, I like I said, I respect you as a content creator, but I more appreciate you for being the kind of human being that you are. And that's why I enjoy working with you, and I appreciate all the knowledge you brought to today's show. I'm glad that you got a chance to take a look at the show notes. But on our way out, just do me a favor. Tell everyone where they can follow you on Twitter, but more importantly, check out your other works that you do with Four Guys with Quarters and everything else you got going on.
Yeah, Four Guys with Quarters, Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern. We're supposed to have a show today, but it depends what what actual gaming topics there are for us to discuss. And we've been in the works with Viacom and iHeartRadio because we're on their podcast, but we've been in talks with them for their stream platforms and in talks with Amazon to get our stuff on Prime. So, look forward to that in the future, hopefully.
Well, that's pretty amazing, dude. That is pretty amazing. And listen, I'll say it again. Thanks to chat for being the chat. You guys are the creme de la creme of chats for YouTube. I listen to a lot of shows, and there are very few chats that I could put together with mine, and 2 come to mind immediately. One, of course, is the Iron Lords podcast. Their chat is always fantastic. And, of course, the Basement Radio Arcade podcast chat is also very good. These are places where I'm hoping that gamers show up and that they talk with each other in a manner that's respectful, and that even though you don't agree with someone's opinion, you don't have to attack them. You can politely disagree and keep it moving. Of course, I want to thank my 2 guests. Clowns, of course, from the beginning, and Brap, Enrique from Brap showed up, which was really great. And I'll close out with this. This week, I have a big show coming up on Wednesday, like I said earlier. That's going to be the Xbox Factor podcast. And there's a couple of big Xbox topics in there that I think everyone is going to enjoy, especially if you are an Xbox gamer who's really kind of just been sick and tired of the way some YouTubers, and this is going across the board, this is hundreds of shows, just completely either gave up on the brand or just constantly whining and crying about the brand. If you don't like that, you're going to enjoy that particular show. If you're new to the channel, check it out. I mean, again, this is a positive channel. And of course, Fridays, Breakfast with Boom. I'm going to be putting out, the guest list is pretty stout, and I'm really excited for the topics we have for that. So please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you again for tuning in for over an hour of this very, very serious topic of video game violence versus real-world violence. I'm your host, MrBooMStickXL, and I do wish everyone a great day. Take care, everyone.